My VR game of the year last year, Behemoth, has just been updated on PSVR2 for the second time in a couple of months, and it's a really solid patch. And today we're going to be talking about it. We're going to be talking a little bit about the last patch as well, because I didn't jump in and play that and make a video on it when it came out, but I did actually have some experience with it, and that one fundamentally changed the game a little bit more than this recent one has, but they're both really worth mentioning. And the main question I really want to answer is it time to pick up this game if you've been waiting for it to be patched up? Before we jump in and take a look and kind of break down everything that Skydance have said about the game going forward as well, and the patch notes for this patch that came out on the 12th, only 25% you are subscribed. If you do feel like subbing to the channel, please feel free to do so, because we are trying to get to 20,000 subs. That is the goal. Hoping to reach it over the next couple of months, so please feel free to do so. Thank you to our patrons and YouTube members as well. Without them, this wouldn't be possible. With that being said, let's take a look, first and foremost, at the patch that came out a couple months ago and break down what that did. The patch drop that kind of overhauled the combat a little bit. Now, at launch, some people complained that Behemoth's combat was feeling a little bit hit or miss in terms of the parry detection and the hit detection and stuff like that, and a little bit about the stamina as well. And overall, the last patch, the big one, fixed that up a little bit and made it feel a bit more cohesive than it was before. For me personally, when the game came out, I still found the combat really satisfying. I didn't find that it was that unresponsive or anything like that, but I think it really required you getting into that flow. And at its current point, I played the game twice, once before launch, once after launch, and I've tested out a couple of things after this latest patch, but essentially after that combat patch, it did feel a little bit better, but it does still require you to get into kind of the flow of the combat of this game, because it's a very different feeling game in terms of combat to, say, Arcanage, which came out in January. That feels a little bit more free-flowing, while Behemoth requires you to kind of get into that form of fighting that the game requires, if that makes sense. It's slightly hard to describe if you haven't played it, but if you have played it, you know what I mean. It's by no means bad though, and at launch, I was perfectly happy with the combat experience, and I felt it was brutal, fun, and challenging. Nowadays, it's a little bit easier than it was back then, and it's less inconsistent, but I still felt at launch I was happily recommending it because it did feel fun. If you're waiting for it to be patched up in terms of combat though, that happened a little while ago, and in current day, it feels pretty great. Now, the latest patch on the 12th involves the fixing of 700 or so bugs. And to be honest, this wasn't massively needed to make the game playable or anything like that. You know, in my first initial playthrough of the game before launch, I was playing early build, and the bugs there were a lot more than they were at launch. But even then, I still had a great time playing the game. I ran into one bug which was a little bit wonky, that kind of really stood out, and the rest of them were pretty subtle. Then after launch, after that day one patch, I found that the game played pretty great, and I didn't really run into any bugs there either. The most I would see was a little bit of pop-in, and that has been fixed, both in the last update and this one. So if you've been waiting on that being patched, there you go. However, it's definitely worth having a look at Skydance's actual patch notes and their letter to us players about the game, to see what this update includes and their plans going forward. So, they say, to our dear wings of vengeance, Valentine's Day is just around the corner, now it's gone, and we have wanted to share our love and appreciation for our community with the second major patch for Skydance's Behemoth. The team has been hard at work since the start of the year, and our big focus has been on getting the feedback we've heard from everybody here and turning that into meaningful improvements to the game. Our hope is that if you've said something about the game that irks you, you'll see something in these patch notes that addresses it. So what's in this heart candy filled patch? We've taken a fine-tooth comb across all our environments, and a ton of pops, holes, and floating objects have been addressed across all platforms. We've also figured out what was causing our audio layers to drop out from time to time, so our soundscape should now be relentlessly immersive. Rats will no longer steal Coloss from Ren's inventory, nor the environment, keeping all bars intact. We've spent a good amount of time with hand grips across the game, so climbing, grabbing, and behemoth riding should see some significant improvements. All told, we've fixed over 700 issues, large behemoth-sized and small Ren-sized. This is not our final word, nor our final patch. There are some longer tail-like issues that will take some time to sort, and more quality of life improvements that we'd like to roll out as well. We're also planning on fulfilling our promise to bring arena mode out of beta. We'll have more details about what we're doing there in the coming months. With that, we wish you a happy Valentine's Day. We hope you can feel our love for this game, and for you, our community of Titan Killers and Hollow Delvers. Sincerely, your friends at Skydance Games. Aside from all the pop-in stuff they're talking about here, which is the main issue that I found visually with the game, both before and after launch, the fact they've listened to the community and have put out all these fixes is fantastic. There are some PSVR2-centric fixes in the full patch notes, which are a bit dry to read through. I'll link them down below if you want to see. It's basically a PDF you can go and read. Not everything is listed there, not all 700, but the main ones are, and there are some PSVR2 specific ones, which is great to see. But the main thing here that I felt recently over the last couple of days playing the game again, in the gameplay improvements, kind of fixes my only real criticism of the game gameplay-wise that didn't really click with me, and that was occasionally the climbing, especially in the final Behemoth boss fight, or should I say final overworld Behemoth boss fight, where I wanted to grab onto different ledges and it just didn't really let me. This is now pretty much sorted. It feels great now to climb, and I've really enjoyed jumping in and playing through the game a little bit for the third time, just kind of picking and choosing certain levels and seeing how they feel, and the game does feel a lot more responsive now in that climbing aspect, which is the main thing I wanted to see fixed. There was a little bit of improvement to this in the last patch, and to be honest, it was still perfectly playable and fun. Like, for the 99% of that climbing time, it felt great to do, but it's just that 1% that brought it down, and in VR especially, you feel that 1% more than it actually is, if that makes sense. But now, because of this patch, it is much, much better. The second thing as well is that obviously arena mode is fun, but it's in beta. I want to see what they do with it in the full release when it comes, and it's good to see Skydance aren't done. I had a little bit of PTSD from Saints and Sinners Chapter 2 with a couple of bugs there that still persist to this day. I wish they would get fixed up. The game is still great, but there are a couple of things that Skydance seems to have kind of gone over and glossed over and just gone on to Behemoth, ignoring some of the issues with that game. I was worried they were going to kind of gloss over some issues with Behemoth and move on to the next project and kind of leave this one as it is, which wouldn't be the worst thing in the world because the game is still fun, but it's good to see they're committed to adding these features, content that they promised, and fixes for what people have been complaining about. Overall, the game is great to play. It was at launch, in my opinion. I really, really loved it, but it's even better nowadays. If you play through it before, you might find it feels pretty same, to be honest, because the game, again, felt good anyway, but you might jump in and find that a couple of things that may have bothered you have now been fixed and patched up. Please let me know if you've tried it or jump into the game after this video and enjoy it a little bit more. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next one.